Thou shalt not whatever. That's how we often think of the law of Moses, because that's the way that Moses usually writes his rules. Like, for example, in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. Now, what Moses did is typical of most rules and most laws. They're written in the negative form. Don't do this, because this is wrong. See, that's the nature of law. Law is designed to restrain bad behavior. In fact, most rules originate in response to somebody doing something wrong. And now that they've done it, we don't want that to happen again. And thus we create a law that says, thou shalt not. Now, Leviticus chapter 19 is where Moses gives us some of his social ethics, rules for how to interact with others. Or perhaps I should say, how not to interact with others, because he puts it in the negative form, thou shalt not. Now, there are some people who think of the book of Leviticus, perhaps the law of Moses as a whole, as being old, outdated, and not relevant for our modern times. But you listen to Moses and his social rules, and you'll see they're very relevant for today. For example, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 11, do not steal. Do not deal falsely with one another. Do not lie to one another. Do not defraud your neighbor. Do not rob him. Now that's your good old-fashioned no lying, no cheating, no stealing. And that combination is one of the most basic of the social rules that we have. In fact, we teach it in the home. That's where we first learn it. Parents teach us no lying, no cheating, no stealing. And if a child ever fibs, we say, no, 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 don't lie, tell me the truth. Or, no, don't go in your brother or sister's room and take something without first asking. You see, no lying, no cheating, no stealing. That combination gets played into the laws of every nation, as well as every local community. And we feel a great betrayal of trust when we're the victim of someone lying, cheating, and stealing. In a close relationship, I trusted you, and you lied to me. That's a betrayal of trust. Or with our personal financial information, the credit card and the number that's on it, our Social Security, we trust that when we give that to someone, they'll use it well and not use it to steal from us. And if they do steal, not only do we lose money, but we've had our trust betrayed. Oh yes, what Moses gave then still applies today. No lying, no cheating, no stealing. Here's a related rule, verse 13. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight until the next morning. Now that goes back to the days of the day labor, which some countries still do to this day. That's where you show up on a job, you work for the day, at the end of the day, you get paid. You don't show up, you don't work, you don't get paid. But these people, they needed their money, they showed up every day, they got their day's wage, they ran to the market, they took home supper, they had breakfast and food for the next day. They're out working to get their next day's wages. Now, if you are the man in charge, you're not to withhold the pay that you promised those people. They're counting on it. And you're saying, yeah, but I've got it tied up over here in this business venture. I'm making some money. I'll pay you next week. No, no, no. You do what you said. Pay them what you promised, when you promised. They're counting on it. And you don't take their pay and use it for your advantage to their disadvantage. That sounds like a rule that would still work today, does it not? How about this? Moses had penalties for those who do lie, cheat, and steal. If your actions cost someone else, robbery, fraud, and cheating, the rule in Leviticus chapter 6 was you've got to repay them in full what you took from them, plus 1/5 of the value in interest. That extra is the penalty. Now, he also said, give a guilt offering to the Lord because what you did was wrong, and you need to repent before God. Let me give you another of his social rules. Verse 14, do not curse a deaf man. Don't place a stumbling block in the path of the blind. No cursing the deaf, no tripping the blind. And that imagery is what you and I today would call mocking. We take a guy who can't hear us anyway, so we say whatever we want. We're actually enjoying it because he can't hear it and I can say what I feel like saying. Or a blind man. I should be clearing things from his path. Rather, I leave it. Maybe I even push it there. He trips. I get a good laugh out of it. Moses said, that was wrong. You know, mocking as a general rule is wrong because, well, it hurts other people's feelings. But it's especially bad when you're mocking something that the other person, it's not their fault. It's just the way things are for them. Like, for example, you mock their disability, their handicap, the difficulty they have to deal with, the deaf, the blind, the crippled, the person with a speech impediment. Or maybe it's the color of their skin. Maybe it's the size, they're so big or so tiny. Maybe it's the hair or lack of hair. Maybe it's the big nose, the large ears, or the strange accent. Listen, those kind of things, they may amuse you, but as you mock someone, it doesn't necessarily funny to them. Now, I've got to say a word, though, because sometimes we do like to poke fun with our friends, and we allow ourselves a little bit of liberty among friends. Good-natured teasing, we call it. That's okay, but always remember the guidelines for good humor. Always consider intent, offense, and perception. Intent. What was your intent? To have fun or to hurt? Never to hurt. And offense. How do they perceive it? How do they receive it? Did they get a good laugh or did they get their feelings hurt? If so, it wasn't good. And perception. Others who stand and observe. Do they see this as, oh, this is fun, this is good, or do they see it as, that's less than Christian? It's not the way Jesus would do. Intent, offense, and perception. Always the rules. Don't cross the line and offend others. And if you do, be quick to apologize and repent. Now Moses will take his very positive rule, love your neighbor as yourself, and he'll apply that to the people around us who have whatever difficulties they have, whatever troubles they're dealing with. Be sympathetic with their situation. Perhaps offer a little bit of kindness. But then Moses takes that and turns it into the negative. And don't do anything to them that would be hurtful or demeaning. Nothing that you wouldn't want done to yourself. How about this rule from verse 33? Do no wrong to the stranger who resides with you in the land. Now the stranger here would be the foreigner in these parts. You're not from around here, are you, fella? Right, this is someone who's come into your territory, but they aren't from your territory. But, he says, they've settled in. They reside with you. He says, you treat them like you do the rest of the natives of the land. Treat them like your longtime neighbors. And why would you do that? Well, you do it because you love him the way you love yourself, the way you'd like to be loved. Or he puts it to them this way. Remember, there was a time you were an alien in the land of Egypt. You know what it's like to be a foreigner in someone else's land. Use the same hospitality for someone who's a stranger in your land as you would want if you were the stranger in someone else's land. It's loving your neighbor as you would want to be loved. I'll point this out to you. The Greek word for hospitality to strangers, it's the word philoxenos. Now, this is the love of strangers. It picks up on the word xenos, which is stranger, but it picks up on phileo, which is the word for love. This is Moses' rule of love your neighbor, only we could add the word love your new neighbor. That's the stranger who's moved in next door. Show them the kindness you show all of your neighbors. Verse 16 says, don't go about as a slanderer among your people. Don't go around saying bad things about someone. You don't want anybody doing that about you, right? You don't like people talking behind your back. You don't like them telling others things that will turn their opinion against you. So keep your comments to yourself. Verse 17 says, do not hate your fellow man in your heart. Don't harbor in your heart hatred, bitterness, and ill will towards someone else. You need to find a healthy way to deal with it and then move on. Like Paul said in Ephesians 4:26, you don't let the sun go down on your anger. By end of day, get rid of it and let's move on. Verse 17 says, you may reprove your neighbor, but don't incur sin because of him. Modern translations will say something like this. You can have a frank discussion of issues with your neighbor. You can tell them exactly how you feel about something. You're encouraged to do so, but you can't do it and sin. That is, you can't haul off and hit them, or you can't use hateful words, etc., etc. You can talk it out, whatever your differences it may be, but you can't do it in a way that's sinful. Now, if you're not inclined to say anything to the guy, that's fine. You don't have to talk about it to him, but don't talk about it with anyone else either. That's the no slander rule. Keep it to yourself. Now, you look at what Moses has done for us in this passage. He's taken that love your neighbor rule and applied it to our social interactions. But I'm finding his rule a little bit annoying, aren't you? Because it takes shots at us. See, no matter how good a person you are, you find yourself sometimes doing some of these very things that Moses says don't do, because it's not a very loving thing to do. It's bad behavior. But that's right. We've got to be careful how we treat others in our actions and in our words. We need to listen carefully to what Moses says in his do's and don'ts of social ethics. That is, if you want to be different, if you want to be better, if you want to be holy.